Yeah, so let's kick off. I know we're going to have attendees filtering in, but we can sort of get this show on the road. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Ezzell. I'm the head of community at Maple. We're going to talk about from woman to mother, navigating the shift in identity in honor of Mother's Day, which I'm very excited about. I don't know about you all. My day.
Yeah.
I leave the house on Mother's Day. I'm gone for almost a month.
That's it.
To it. Yeah. I'm heading out on my own. So let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Tell me, what is your name and title? Where do you work? Sort of what's your mission and family life look like? Alisa, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is Alisa Alter, and I have been called, and now I'm super into it, the Amy Poehler of vaginas. So what an intro. So I on my platform, as well as on the postpartum platform, which is postprtm, which is a company that I am one of the co-founders of and the head of content. My goal is our goal is to shine a light on and bring levity around the real truths, all of them, about motherhood and womanhood. And I am in Brooklyn, New York, and my mission is really to empower all of us. I think we all deserve the tools possible. Because of my background in dance and as I was a professional Broadway performer for over 10 years, through movement, self-expression, and straight up education, giving us all the tools that we need to feel safe, knowledgeable, and at home in our bodies. Because I really believe that if we spent as much time, energy, and discipline and resources on our insides and our inner experience as we do and are conditioned to on our outsides, we will absolutely change the world.
I love that.
Thanks. Oh, and I have a 2.5-year-old son. That's my home life.
And I'm also a mom. There's that.
And I'm a mom, and I have 2 cats and a dog and a husband. So there are like a lot of people here, and somebody always needs water.
Yeah. Or a snack.
Or a snack.
I'm snack queen. I just enjoy snack all the time. And it's never the right snack.
No, absolutely not.
If I have a wet snack, they want a dry snack. And when I have a
banana
snack,
break.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The banana like gets cut in half, and then you can't have that
now
banana.
It's broken.
Yeah, I can't have
it's
that
broken.
I know.
We've been telling my toddler that, because he's like, how do I fix it? And we say it gets fixed in your belly. So far it's working. So far it's working.
Maggie, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm gonna have to try that one. I'm running out of things. I'm starting to revert to because I said so, which never really works.
Yeah.
So my name is Maggie Moore. It's great to be here. I serve as the head of partnerships at SimpliFed. And SimpliFed really envisions a world where every parent feels good about feeding their family. So we exist to help parents access insurance covered benefits for baby feeding services, which are mandated to be covered under the Affordable Care Act. And so we have a network of providers who hold a range of different credentials, lived experiences, language skills, RNs, NPs, IBCLCs, internationally board certified lactation consultants, lactation counselors, who support families 100% virtually. So we work with parents virtually through a secure, HIPAA compliant telehealth platform that can be accessed by phone, computer, however, and from anywhere really. However it works, we know it can be a little crazy. Yeah, we're really all about kind of changing the narrative in the space. We're 100% supportive, inclusive, and non-judgmental. So however you feed your baby, we got your back and we're here for you. My background is in finance. I transitioned into public health, so definitely made a pivot. And my home life is crazy. I have a 3-year-old daughter who is delicious and wonderful and really fun. And then I have 3 stepsons who are much older. My husband and I are 20 years apart. And then we have a adopted son. So I like to say we have the world's most modern family. And it keeps us on our toes. It's a lot of fun, and really, really grateful to be doing this work.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Maggie. Isobel, do you want to go next?
Sure. So my name is Isobel Benesch. I'm the founder of Atlas of Motherhood, which is a maternal wellness platform that shares the best mother care and support practices from around the world. We do this through expert-led virtual classes from experts all across the globe. And it was really inspired by my own experience of giving birth in 2 different countries and seeing how the care that you receive during your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum really impact your experience of it. I currently live in New Zealand with my husband, and I have 4 boys, ages 3, 5, 7, and 10. So we are a busy, wild, very fun household.
I know about boys. I have 2 boys very close in age, and I'm sure Maggie knows too, they are busy and beating each other to a pulp all the time. I don't understand why. So I can resonate there. Okay, so let's jump in. The journey from woman to mother is one of the most transformative experiences. And in honor of Mother's Day, we want to chat about that, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, and just be really honest and tell you the things that no one wants to tell you. Let's kick off. I'm excited to hear from everyone today. Let's start maybe at the beginning with the shift of not being pregnant to being pregnant. And there are so many emotions at play: mental, physical changes, behavioral shifts, not to mention how it impacts your relationships with your partner, your friends, your family, and with work. So let's talk about what you can expect here and maybe get some advice on how to handle it. Now, as our doula is out delivering a baby, again, if there's anything about maternal care that anyone wants to add, please feel free to do that. Isobel, why don't you kick us off? You have such a unique perspective, having lived and given birth in different countries. Can you talk a little bit about what things stood out to you, what were considered important during pregnancy?
Yeah, so I think I gave birth twice in the United States and California. My first 2 births were actually ended up being very medicalized. With my first, I was very rigid. I'm a very type A perfectionist personality. So my birth plan, was I put so much work into this birth plan and exactly how I wanted it to be and exactly how I thought it was going to be. And it turned out to be nothing like that at all. It was a planned cesarean because he was breech and he wouldn't turn. And then we found out we were pregnant with our 3rd when we'd already sold all of our belongings and we were moving in 2 weeks across the world. So I had my 3rd and 4th pregnancies here in New Zealand, and it was really eye-opening, the whole experience in general, but particularly pregnancy. I was under obstetrician care in the States, and then here it's all midwifery led. And research actually does show that for low risk pregnancies, midwife led care can be really beneficial. And I did find that the kind of less medicalized approach to pregnancy definitely made me less fearful, and it feel more like it was a natural process that kind of happened. One kind of example would be that my midwife said for birth, we could decide whether to go to the hospital, whether to have the baby at home, or if I wanted to go to the birth center. And none of those were weighed, with or had more weight than the other. It wasn't like there was a gold standard and then, having birth at home would have been a lesser kind of option, which I felt like previously that's definitely how I felt about it. And that really made me more confident going into birth, thinking, okay, it isn't something to be feared. It isn't something that like actually needs to be done to me to help me give birth. And that just shift in mindset really, I think was beneficial.
So interesting, because I've only ever given birth in the United States, and it was never an option. No one ever told me I could give birth at home. That was not even on the radar when I went to go meet my OBGYN for the first time and tell her, I think I'm pregnant. So just interesting to hear you say that. Alisa, could you talk about how we nurture ourselves during pregnancy and how we make sure we're getting what we need from ourselves and from others? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. And during this time, like the early going from not pregnant to pregnant, I mean, it's such a transition. I think this is something that's unique to, the way this also affects your relationship, the person giving birth and the person who isn't, because, almost immediately your life completely changes. Like you're out of control. You are no longer controlling anything. You are not in the driver's seat. Like I started throwing up essentially immediately. And, it really was this lesson of surrender that like, I can't, there's this process happening and that continues to happen, and it can be jarring. It can be miserable. You're exhausted. You don't feel well. You're not supposed to tell anyone. And when I was thinking about this question, something that came up to me was, that really came forward for me that I think is the hardest to navigate, is that as people find out you're pregnant, they get so excited and are like, oh my God, don't you just feel amazing? Isn't pregnancy the best? Don't you feel great? And you usually are still not feeling great. And, I remember having a few instances where people were celebrating and they were like, well, have you thought about names? And I was like, all I think about is trying not to vomit. Like I have plastic bags in my purse for the subway because that's all, like I'm trying to survive each day here. Like I can't wait to celebrate. But thinking about this distinction between really what we're told it's supposed to feel like and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to react versus what our actual experience is, and really being present with that. And it's again, like, I think we start learning these bigger motherhood lessons right from the beginning. And it's that lesson of both and. Like, I really wanted to be pregnant. So yeah, I was really excited and I was really scared. Like I was actually like pregnant. Like I wanted to get, and then I was pregnant, and then I was nauseous, and then I was tired, and the hormones, and when it's not all it, there's lots and lots of magic, but it's not all magic.
Yeah.
It's also being nervous to brush your teeth because once the toothbrush crosses the threshold of your lips, you're gagging, and that doesn't mean you're not happy, but it also doesn't mean that's not happening.
Yeah.
And to like just trust that these people who say I mean, I feel like it's a lot of at the beginning is this nurturing of what's happening inside you versus what's coming at you externally.
Yeah.
And knowing that most of these people have the best intentions and they're trying to relive their glory days and only remembering the good things.
Yeah.
And while that can feel isolating, it's also really empowering to be able to say like, that's so wonderful that that's your experience. I need to throw up and take a nap now. Like,
Yeah.
I don't,
Love that answer. Such a good answer.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that also if you can find this space to just, I mean, and none of it's going to show up perfectly, but to just even just have that awareness and be aware of that distinction between like, that's what you remember of your experience 40 years ago when you had a baby, 20 years ago when you had a baby, whatever it is different than my experience. And these are two separate things. I think that again is like the beginning of a practice and setting yourself up well to evolve through pregnancy and into parenthood, because everybody has got something to say about everything. And the reality is they're not you and they don't know your baby the way you know your baby. And their baby was their baby, which is different than your baby.
And pregnancies are all different too.
And pregnancies are all different. And so it's like, thank you for sharing. Like I would say to a lot of people, thank you for sharing your experience with me.
Yeah. And I don't know if this happened with any of you, but for me, the biggest change right after I became pregnant was realizing that so much of this was on me, and this was not a shared experience that I was having with my partner.
Yes.
My husband's life didn't really change at all. And he was like, his biggest thing was not telling people I was pregnant at the beginning, you know, like he was like, that was the thing that he was dealing with. It was like, well, he's excited and he wants to tell people, but I asked him not to tell anyone until we made sure it was a viable pregnancy. And so he was like, oh, I just got to keep this secret in. And for me, it was like, I woke up, my body didn't feel good. I was nervous. I was nervous all the time because I was nervous. I was lose the baby. I was nervous I'd be a bad mom. I was nervous that like something was happening and I wasn't doing the right things. And I'd go to work and I was nervous they would find out and I'd lose my job. And I didn't want to go to the gym because I was nervous about working out the way I had worked out before. And I was nervous about the food that I was eating. And I was worried all the time. And he did not experience any of that or seem to be aware of any of that. And for me, it was like right away, the dynamic of our relationship
Everything
changed.
And that's something, again, like, and if you can even just speak to that with your partner and just be like, here, like, and you're watching this, and that's got to be a weird thing too, to watch all of this happen to me and to be completely detached from it. But if you can talk about that now, it again will set you up well, because something that's really freaking hard about all of it, so many things. But another thing that's really hard is that, especially if you now are in, I'll say, like, if you're in more of a partnership than like the traditional, like 1950s heteronormative dynamic in your relationship, it's really hard to ignore those gender roles when one of you is 100% taking care of literally building fingernails, like you are making a human, and the other one is eating sushi.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you're kind of like, wait a minute. I thought we were both on this train together, and nobody prepared me. It was not something my mother talked to me about. It was not something my friends who were already pregnant talked to me about. And so I thought that maybe it was just us. And then I got And I feel like we need to talk about that more. Maggie, do you?
100%.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, my experience was a little different because of the nature of our family. My husband was 54 when I got pregnant. And it was sort of like, I think on the outside, like people are like, oh, like you married this old guy and like he's letting you have a baby. And like, I was kind of like, ew, like, and like, it's just there's so many dynamics with having like a big difference in age. And like, I know what you're saying, Lauren. Like, I think and he came to it with his own experience and history.
Yeah.
And so that was like, just, sorry, I'm like, everything. I'm like, stop ringing. So that was interesting. And then like over time we were like fighting about stuff, because I was like, it's really important to me. And everything felt so loaded for me because I knew I was only going to have one. And so I was like, this is my one chance to give birth and do everything. And like, you know, just the nature of our family. And like, he was kind of like, well, like if something like, cause I would have, Isobel, like you, I would have loved to like been able to be home. And like, I had a very low intervention situation, although there were some risks that required some more medical intervention. And I delivered in the hospital, but without any it was very much what I wanted it to be. But the lead up to that was like, and we would fight about it. Like, he was like, it is not going to be exactly what you want it to be. Like, you have to prepare yourself. And he was, of course, 100% right. But I was like, "Bleh," like, you're not growing fingernails. Like, you're not, like, who are you? Like, whatever, and so our dynamic 100% changed. And of course, like, the other piece of it was we had sort of co-parented with other parents, like it's just complicated. So that piece was less of a transition. Like, my peers and my friends who married someone, had a baby, bought a house with them, had a baby with them, like, their process is very different. And I think part of, like, what I appreciated with my good friends was, like, becoming a parent, like, we all put our, like, guards down and we're just like, how are you surviving? What are you doing? And, like, that really helped too, to be able to just, like, talk about it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's more open now, I think, than it used to be, where people are really talking about the difficult part of having kids.
Yeah.
Something else that just popped into my head that I didn't say before that I remember being particularly surprising and upsetting was that all the, like, the grandparents, the now grandparents, really only ever asked about, like, I felt very invisible. And even with my own parents, I was like, you guys, like I'm your kid. Like, I know we're gonna get, like, a new kid in the family, but like I'm your kid and I don't feel good. Like, where are you? Like,
Yeah.
what's happening?
Well, and the things people say to you, even in your own family. I will never forget, both my mom and my mother-in-law told me, wow, I can really see you're pregnant in your face. And I was like, did you wake up this morning and choose violence? Like, do you want to die? How could you say that to me?
Yeah, I was
know.
diagnosed with gestational diabetes, and my brother is a nurse. He's like a nurse, and he's seen a lot. He's been a nurse for 20 years. And he was like, "Ooh, get ready for a C-section and a 12-pounder." And I was like,
oh my God.
Really?
Like, why would you say that to me?
Why did they do that?
Like, what? It was like, so, and then I, like, told his wife, my sister-in-law, and she told me that her brother said to her, well, you haven't really gone through birth because you had a C-section. And she was like, I will literally, like, I will murder you.
Did she rip her throat out? That's what I would do.
Oh, that hurts my heart, because
horrible.
I had one of each. I had a natural birth.
Of course, you've given birth twice.
C-section, and it was emergency C-section. And for a long time, I was really disappointed that with my second, I did not get to have, a natural birth, which is what I wanted. And gosh, I can't even imagine hearing someone say that somehow having abdominal surgery because you couldn't give birth the other way is not birth. It is cesarean birth. It is still a birth.
Well, and I would, like, Lauren, you were saying natural birth, which we, like, say that.
Yeah, you're right.
And what we mean is an unmedicated vaginal birth.
Right. You're right. You should
so
right terminology.
You could just say vaginal birth versus.
That's right.
And so I'm always very specific with that, because
Yeah.
That baby
That's right.
came out your body.
That's right.
100%.
We're all moms. And I had a 4th degree tear with my son, and it was horrendous. And, like, I mean, emotionally, I'm still dealing with it. Like, it really was unbelievable. I've written about it a lot. I've talked about it on my podcast. I mean, that was a big reason for my desire to start postpartum, the platform. And I know, like, people are not going to like this, but here's the thing. Oh God, like, fingers crossed, it's my body, it's my choice. I know that's up in the air. But I'm going to have a cesarean next time. I'm terrified that something will happen. I'll go into labor early and I'll end up having another vaginal birth. I
don't want to
handle that. Yeah. That is not in line with the safety of the mother in that. Right. And I've had to reckon with a lot of, like, I really believe that there's no one right way to become a mother, to have a baby, to feed your baby. Like, oh my God, absolutely not. but I still had to come up against things that I've internalized from external conditioning that I do not believe, but they were coming up and I'm like, well, no, maybe if I have another vaginal birth, that's how I'll know I've transcended the trauma and I've healed my PTSD. And I was like, no, no, that is not true. And I was like, I don't believe that. What is this? Where is this coming from? And it's coming from everywhere. And it's like, we talk about this with vaginal birth, but also breastfeeding.
Yes.
You know, it's just and it's like, no.
And if you can't breastfeed, which a lot of moms can't, like, there's options and it's okay. And you're still feeding your kid and your kid's going to be fine.
I think that point, Alisa, is a really good sort of segue into building your village, a village of support, so that when you sort of have these feelings and you're expressing them, you make sure that you surround yourself with people who are going to support you and make sure you get what you need and advocate for you when you feel like you can't advocate for yourself, because there's going to be a lot of instances where that happens. Maggie, do you, I know we had chatted before about village building. Do you have any like recommendations or tips on village building, or anybody on this call? Like, how do you build a village while you're
I mean, so I'll start, and Isobel, I'm sure you have lots of thoughts having four babes. I would just say, I think as it relates to feeding, right? One of the things we talk a lot about is like, you need to have the birth plan, right? Even if it's 10 pages written out perfectly or like a rough idea, right? Like there's of course a big preparation process for that, because it is such a transformative event, but it's a one-time event, right? And then you have the baby and you do have all of the fallout or, sort of follow up from that for yourself, right? But the thing you spend the vast majority of your time doing is feeding, right? So like, how do you build a plan for that? And I think that's part of what's in our mission and in our DNA, is like really just starting that process prenatally. In terms of a village, I think for me, a lot of it too is about like cutting out the noise. So like, if you find a care provider who you vibe with, who you trust, and who you can run things past, whether it's related to feeding, whether it's related to birth, whether it's related to, whatever it is, ask that person or that organization or that, for me, it was my OB, was OB midwives. And so it was a combination. I built relationships with all of them and I didn't look stuff up. Like I called, I was just like, call me back when you have a second. And they took my call and I was like, I have so much respect for you. You're so busy, like, but you have expertise. And then I trusted that expertise because that sort of made things a lot easier and took a lot of the friction out. I think it's very easy to get caught up in all the noise, and trying to be as evidence-based and data-driven as possible is just really valuable, because then there's all those layers too of judgment and shame and like, cultural norms and all those pieces, which are going to be there regardless. So arming yourself with evidence, I think is really key.
Yeah. Isobel, do you have any color to add around building a village, or how do you make sure you have the right support group around you?
Yeah, I think we like creating a birth plan now is really well known, but I think what's less well known is creating a postpartum plan.
Yeah.
I do think we focus so much on the birth itself. Like, I think most of the classes I had taken were always about like the stages of labor and like recognizing when you're in transition. And to be honest, that, when I was in transition, I wasn't like, I'm in transition. And even like my husband, didn't say like,
it's happening.
It's right now, like with my second, I think I was like, started vomiting and I was already in transition. And, the nurse at the hospital was like, okay, she should have an epidural now. She's like really done so well. She's ready. But like, really, I was about to have the baby. But I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't it's really great to take a class and understand what the birth process looks like, but focusing 100% of your attention on birth itself when really doesn't really prepare you for motherhood and everything that comes after birth. And we're so like a baby-centered society that we focus so much on the baby and the pregnancy and not on what happens after the baby arrives. And creating a postpartum plan, I think like it would be amazing if one day hospitals, were not only telling you to do a birth plan, but saying during your pregnancy, now's the time to create a postpartum plan. And how are you going to be cared for and supported during this time in your life, and putting into place not only practical support, like, can you start a meal train? Like, who's going to drop off food for you so that it's not just on you and your partner? Like, who's going to be there for you emotionally? Like, who are people that you could debrief your birth to? Like, are you seeing a therapist now? Can you go ahead and set up an appointment with them? Like, are there virtual appointments so you don't have to leave the house? Just so much so. And if you don't have family and friends, like, what are ways that you could outsource that help? And doing it during pregnancy by potentially putting it on your registry could be so beneficial if to help with cost.
I love that. You also mentioned one time we had talked about this, Isobel. I swear I tell everybody about this. You know what I'm going to say. I don't know if everyone on this call knows, but Isobel has a lot of expertise and knowledge around maternal care in a bunch of different types of cultures. And she was telling me this story about somewhere in Europe, correct me if I'm wrong, like maybe a Scandinavian country, which makes sense.
Yeah.
I was going to say probably. I don't know what you're going to say, but probably.
Yeah. That they have mama's partner come in when they're going to prenatal appointments, and they ask the partner, how are you helping to support mom? And what does that look like? And what does it look like now? And what does it look like after birth? And how do you support mom? Mom, are you feeling supported? And it's like a mini therapy session at the hospital or clinic or wherever, they're getting their prenatal care. And I sat there and I'm like, why are we not doing this in the United States to prepare ourselves and our partners with helping each other and getting us on the same page and starting that discussion before the baby is here? Because trying to have that conversation when the baby is here and the baby is screaming and you have postpartum depression and you haven't showered in 3 days and your boobs hurt and you're leaking milk and you haven't eaten anything and you're fighting and you're wearing the same sweatpants after 3 days, it's not a good ideal time to have a conversation like that.
I'm laughing.
Actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
It was a midwife in Sweden who told me that story. And she actually said that it's like planting the seed. So they don't actually tell parents, or speak to the partner and say, this is the way you should do it. It's more to just kind of plant the seed that roles should be divided. And after birth, the mother's focus is going to be the baby and caring for the baby, and that the partner should be kind of taking over everything else. And I think that's why it's so important to have a plan as well, and have like any experts that you're going to want to see postpartum, so that if you have a partner or whoever your support person is, they have that information. So you're not like, I need to see a pelvic floor, physio. And they're like, what's a pelvic floor physio? And then they're like Googling and like, I don't know what this is, so
you're probably like, what's a pelvic floor?
The stress of not only for you, but your partner, knowing that like, you've got all the information, you have the tools if you need them, and they're there.
Yeah, I love that. I wish we did that here. I want to shift the conversation a little bit, and I want to talk about the impossible subject of pregnancy loss. I read something recently that said it affects 1 in 4 women. I have lost a baby before. I had a miscarriage. And I know that a lot of women in my family have, a lot of my friends have. And so I thought maybe we could just touch on this share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Alisa, do you want to start?
Sure. And this is not something I have experienced firsthand at this point. But I have had the honor of helping and support women through that, clients that I've worked with who've lost pregnancies, whether it was technically a chemical pregnancy, which from my perspective, you were pregnant and you are no longer pregnant. That is a loss of a pregnancy and a loss of a baby. And I think that we get a lot of messaging that almost that doesn't count. So I would just like to put it out there that counts. And unfortunately, stillbirth. And so I have been witness to this, and it is, when I see what's happening around these mothers and the pressures that they're feeling, I don't know what to post on social media. I don't know who to tell. I don't know how to this. And I just, you allow, when that happens, I think everyone involved really needs like we're all adults, so you don't need my permission for anything, but I'm giving you full permission to grieve, to absolutely grieve, and give yourself space to do that. And whatever that looks like for you, if that's crying in the shower, if it's screaming into a pillow, if it's throwing pillows, if it's, I don't know, buying yourself a cashmere onesie, whatever it is that you need to do, or that, whatever that shows up as, and something that I really encourage people to do. And when they've done this, it's the response has been really great, is to create some sort of personal ceremony or ritual around it, honoring that pregnancy, that baby, that experience. And whatever comes up for you in doing that. But I always like to encourage people to include writing a letter to that baby with whatever it is that you have to say about your experience. So if anyone, is still holding on to some of that, it's surprising what comes up and what comes through with that. And again, I cannot speak from firsthand, but having witnessed that, it does seem to create a space for a really expansive transformation around something that is, at the end of the day, just, it's awful.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maggie, what about you? Is there anything you want to share around pregnancy loss?
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea. I think that's a really beautiful way to process. I love to write, to get stuff out, and often end up in a different place after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's great. I mean, it's not something that I have firsthand experience with either, but have, seen a lot happen with friends and family. And, I love that suggestion, Alisa. And I think that, we live in such a challenging time with obviously news around, abortion rights. And I think just these topics are so fraught and so loaded and so challenging, and have so many layers that, I think, I'll quote our one of my colleagues, Erin, who just says, give yourself grace, just give yourself a minute. It's okay to have multiple feelings about things and need time to process. And, and I think us being able to show, I will say, I think some more high, celebrity people who have platforms have sort of shared their own experiences. And I think that that's a really great thing too, because I can't imagine having that much attention on you, and the sort of gift of sharing that experience and normalizing that experience, I think is really important and powerful, because even when we don't believe it, we do internalize a lot of the external stuff that's out there. So I don't know. Those are my rambly thoughts. I'm an emotional cheese ball, so I'll probably start crying if I keep talking anymore.
I liked what you said. It was interesting when you were saying how celebrities share their story. And it sort of goes back to Alisa, writing it down, even though that's very private, you're sharing it sort of out loud, making it tangible and taking it outside of your head or your body and putting it on paper.
Yeah.
When we lost at like 9 weeks, and my sister-in-law called me, and you're still first trimester, so it's still very early, but because it was my second pregnancy, had already had a baby. So I was like very attached because it was the
Yeah.
second time around. I had been through the experience. And so I was very excited to be pregnant, and found out immediately at like 5 weeks. So for weeks, I was telling my family and I was telling my friends, and I was so excited, and I was already putting together like, this is what I want, the dynamic to be in the household, and I want baby to be in the bedroom for the first 3 months, and then we're going to have the kids bunk together. And like, we were having these conversations. And my sister-in-law, right after it happened, my sister-in-law called me because my husband told her, and because I asked him to tell everybody. I didn't want to have the conversation.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to have the conversation. And she called me, and I remember staring at the phone while it was ringing, and I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody about it. And then I thought, well, I'll just pick up and tell her I don't want to talk about it. And then I picked up the phone, and she was like so kind and open and caring, and it all just sort of spilled out. And I felt a lot better after talking to her about it. And I didn't think that I would, because I had talked to my partner about it, but it was different talking to her about it. And, she understood, and it was just nice to get it out there with somebody else. So yeah, I don't know.
And when you make it tangible like that, when you share it with someone else outside your household, so I mean, even if that's the only person you told, it's like it becomes a little bit more public.
Yeah.
That takes some of the shame off of it.
Yeah.
And that's like, by sharing it, and that's not to shame anyone who is not in a place where they want to share it publicly. And maybe that's right now, maybe that's forever. But if you do have, whether or not you have a platform, if you do feel that that's something you can share, you really are gifting another woman who feels completely alone and isolated and abandoned and like a failure in that experience. You're helping take some of that away. And I think we innately know that and feel that, which is why we do talk about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Isobel?
I have experienced a miscarriage. I wasn't actually planning on getting pregnant. I think we got pregnant like on our wedding night and went on this really long honeymoon, and then came back and found out, shortly after that I was pregnant. And even though I wasn't planning on getting pregnant, and we hadn't planned on getting pregnant, so that quickly, just like you, Lauren, I was attached, very attached immediately. And then a few weeks later miscarried, and it's devastating and can feel really isolating. I hadn't told anyone. My mom is a nurse. She's a NICU nurse and worked in maternity wards. So she, from the get-go, like, I feel like that statistic is like been in my head since forever, like 1 in 4 women. So thankfully I didn't feel shame around it, because that was so ingrained, like it happened. It's way more common than you think. Yeah. People just don't discuss it. Like, it isn't something that's openly discussed. Right. But it did feel, I think the fact that nobody had even known that I was pregnant, because I wasn't telling people at that point in my first trimester, that it was really isolating. Yeah. And it happened at work as well. Like, it started happening at work, and I, was surrounded by, I was, young, and I was surrounded by these male engineers, and I'd never been pregnant before. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And like, looking around, like, I can't tell these guys, like, these guys, like, who do I go to? What do I do? And I was training from San Francisco, like out of the city to my work. So I didn't even have a car to like go somewhere. So just like, I think it can be, it's not only that it's like devastating in general, but it's also isolating. And then there's a lot of like, you don't want, even when it's happening, you don't know like who to tell or where to go or what you're supposed to really do with it. Recently, which I think is really amazing, New Zealand put into law paid bereavement leave. So I think for miscarriage, so you have 3 days off, because that was like another thing. Then I'm like, okay, I've, said, sorry, I have to go. Something's come up, and I have someone drive me to the urgent care, and they're like, this is happening. And then I'm like, I'm not going back to work, but then you have to call in and make something up like, okay, I'm sick, so it's just, I don't know. It's a really devastating
and so hard to navigate.
Then difficult to navigate.
Really difficult to know how to navigate. And look, there's 4 women on this call. 50% of us have experienced it.
I also want to say that laugh that I let out was not because any of this was funny. It's at the absurdity that also it's like, then you're at urgent care, you're experiencing a miscarriage, and you're like,
have to lie to work.
You have to, and you're like, I don't know, which excuse am I picking? And it's like, why am I having to think about like, why is this where I just want to go home? And just the fact I am so sorry for anyone and everyone who in that moment is like, okay, so am I gonna say I have diarrhea? Am I choosing food poisoning or what?
Well, it's even in the awful. In the urgent care, they're, they do the ultrasound and then they're like, I'm sorry. And then you're like, okay, so now what? Like, what am I, do I go back to work? Do I go home? Like what, I think they're like, the more discussion we have around it, the more awareness that it is something that happens more often than, than we often know. The easier it can be for other women to navigate it as it happens, because that's a lot of the, uncertainty and not knowing what to do.
I think so much around the getting pregnant, potential miscarriage, giving birth, postpartum, there is so much that we don't talk about explicitly, or we sort of gloss over that then, because we just don't actually have the like solid information. And there's a lot like you can't know until you know. But that like even I had a friend who had a miscarriage who shared that like, she was told to expect like a heavy period. And she was like, that was not that there were contractions, there was like, and that even the information, and this wasn't, she had a baby. So it's like, even if she'd just been told like it sometimes comes in waves similar to labor as your body's trying to, in the same thing, like get some stuff out, to be able to expect that then reduces some of the fear in the moment. Like people tell you after you have a baby, like you'll experience some bleeding, some. That was ridiculous. Like I didn't know what level to be concerned about, like they're like, your first period is different. I'm like, that's not enough of a word to give me a heads up of what that was going to be like.
So true.
There are more words you could have used that could have given me a heads up.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, thank you all. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. We only have like 10 minutes left. So this has gone really fast, by the way. I want to talk a little bit, because we have talked about birth and we have talked about pregnancy a lot. I want to talk about sort of this new normal and this shift, because I feel like that's where the biggest shift for me happened, where it was like, I feel like a completely different person now than I did pre-kids. So I don't know, Maggie, do you want to chat with us about sort of infant feeding and links with maternal mental health, because I think so much of the postpartum early days is about feeding. Like, am I wrong? So much
No,
of it.
not wrong at
You're
all.
not wrong. Not
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, when we look at the stats in the US, right, the big picture is the vast majority of moms initiate breastfeeding or start breastfeeding, right? 80 to 85%. The recommendation is to exclusively breastfeed for 6 months. And that 85, call it, drops to about 25 when you get to 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. So there's a huge amount of drop off in between those two time periods. And what we know is that the majority of parents end up doing some combination of different types of feeding, right? And that there is just tremendous misinformation and judgment and, kind of polarity and fragmentation around this whole experience. And as it relates to mental health, I think, one of the stats we talk a lot about is that if a mom doesn't meet her feeding goals that she has set for herself, if she has set them, and she's 4 times more likely to experience postpartum depression, right? And so like that's really powerful in terms of, and that's why we harp so much and I focus so much on, building that plan, right? And like you said, Isobel, like having that postpartum plan, is just so critical. Even though you can't fully plan for everything, you can't anticipate exactly what's going to happen. These risks exist and they are what they are, but you can arm yourself and make yourself aware. And I think, again, like our mission is to really kind of change that narrative, change practice around, of course, optimizing for breastfeeding success for families and for moms and babies where it's possible, where it's, wanted, where it can be done. There's tremendous benefits for moms and for babies, but it also just, it doesn't work for everyone. Right. And so like, how can we take some of the pressure off that? And some of the unnecessary pressure, by the way, off of that, right? And offer solutions that are covered by insurance, that are mandated to support because of the impact that it has, not only on mom and baby physical health, but also on maternal mental health and kind of whole family health, right? Like so much of those early days and also just that whole postpartum period really does center around feeding the damn baby. So we're,
Maybe.
I'm glad. Thanks for the question. Cause I think it's a good thing to prepare for.
Yeah, I'm navigating some of our questions just because we don't have Hillary here, who is going to talk a lot about like postpartum depression and care and some of the things you need to be aware of. So I want to touch on that in just a second, but maybe Isobel, you could start us off, and then I want to end Alisa with like body image for moms, because I think that's a big piece of the conversation that we should talk about. Isobel, is there any postpartum care practices that you recommend?
This is really like, I could talk about this for hours. It's a lot of like why I did create Atlas of Motherhood is because I think it is so important to prepare for birth and beyond, like that postpartum period. There's research that shows that the care and support you receive during the postpartum period has long-term health effects. So they say like the first 40 days for the next 40 years. And it actually shows that when you are prepared for postpartum, there's better health outcomes mentally and physically for mothers. So I could talk about all these different forms of care, but I'm going to stick with 3. Okay, so one would be your village, which we kind of already talked about, and just putting that support into place. Next would be rest. I think rest is so important, and it is so hard to accept and do. Our society, tells us, and actually like, it's almost like we're rewarded for getting back to life and, do as much as possible, as quickly as possible. You get, that pat on the back, or that you're a super mom, when you're out and juggling a kid on your hip and a newborn baby in the, lugging them the car seat. So I think it's so important to rest. And there's so many cultures around the world that actually emphasize that. And it is a really important aspect of postpartum. And then the other one would be nourishing foods. So your body goes through a lot during pregnancy and birth. And so just understanding what nutrients that you need to replenish after birth and putting those into your meals, and then getting kind of support with those meals if you can.
And I will say, I've never eaten more than when I was eating. I was out eating my husband, who weighs 50 pounds on me, by 2 meals a day. I was eating so much food. It was glorious. Breastfeed, you get to eat more. I want to just touch on really quickly baby blues, postpartum depression, and postpartum psychosis. This was something that Hillary was going to go over, but my biggest thing for me was I had postpartum psychosis, which is more rare. And basically that is when you're having these really intense visions of hurting yourself or your baby, and you have them. I had mine for weeks and weeks, and it went completely undiagnosed because I did not realize that this was not normal and that I should have gotten help. So there are sort of 3 different levels that you need to be aware of. You have baby blues, right? So baby blues only last a few days to a week or 2 after your baby is born. They include mood swings, anxiety, sadness, irritability, feeling overwhelmed, which a lot of these things are naturally happening anyway when you have a newborn. Crying, reduced concentration, appetite problems, trouble sleeping. Postpartum depression can be mistaken for baby blues at first, but the signs and symptoms are more intense and they last longer, okay? And they usually interfere with your ability to sort of care for your baby. And they can begin early at the late stages of pregnancy, and they can go up to a year after birth, which I never knew. So this is depressed mood, severe mood swings, excessive crying, difficulty bonding with your baby, loss of appetite, overwhelming fatigue or loss of energy, reduced interest, sense of irritability, fear that you're not a good mother, hopelessness, worthlessness, shame, diminished ability to think clearly or concentrate, restlessness, severe anxiety and panic attacks, and then thoughts of harming yourself or your baby, and reoccurring thoughts of death or suicide. And then postpartum psychosis is a very rare condition that typically develops within the first week or 2 after delivery. This can be confusion, disorientation, obsessive thoughts about your baby, hallucinations and delusions, sleep disturbance, excessive energy or agitation, paranoia, and attempts to harm yourself and your baby. So those are sort of the 3 different ones you need to be aware of. For me, it was just I was constantly having these thoughts of ways that my baby was going to die and ways that I could kill my baby, and never acted on it, but would do some odd things that my husband was like, it's kind of weird that you're doing that. And the problem is neither of us were educated. So even though we both sort of saw it, we didn't realize that we should have gotten help. So I was worried leaving my baby with a nanny or anyone that they would put drops of bleach in his bottle. I don't know why I thought this. I was just convinced it was happening. So I went around the house. I collected all the chemicals, all the bleach. I dumped them. I threw them away, down the drain, in the trash. And then I wouldn't allow anyone to clean my house because I didn't want outside cleaning products brought in. So really out there, weird stuff. So I just want to put that out there before we talk about your body image, because
How did you get help? Do you mind me asking, how did you decide, or you and your husband realize that you needed help?
I didn't know I needed help. I stopped going outside because I was afraid of the light. So I was afraid light was going to hurt my baby. Sunshine, closed all the blinds in the house. I didn't want to take him on walks because I would picture myself pushing him out into traffic. I never did it, but I would see it so clearly happening. And it was about the time at 5 weeks. So I think it started about 2 weeks. So it went from 2 to 5. 5 is when it started getting better. When he started sleeping longer hours and I started sleeping, it started going away. And then when I got pregnant the second time, I was sitting with my OB and I was like, hey, I'm just trying to prepare myself for this, for the visions. And she's like, what? And I'm like, the visions of killing my baby. And she's like, what? And I was like, no. I told her and she was like, oh my God, Lauren, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, well, because you would take my baby away and give him to somebody who's going to hurt my baby. And it was like this cyclical, vicious, like I couldn't get out of it. But I used, things like, and I've told this story before, but in the middle of the night, because my son would not latch. And so I was pumping and then giving him a bottle. In the middle of the night, I was heating up a bottle. And I remember I had him and I was rocking in my arm and the bottle was under the sink. And I remember just watching myself in my head, put his face underneath the water, the running water, to drown him. And these were visions that were happening night and day while I slept, while I was awake. It was just all the fucking time. And, and so I was like trying to prepare myself with the next baby.
Oh my goodness.
So I told my OB and she was like, Lauren, that's postpartum psychosis.
But this is what the big problem is that we have a baby and we get dropped off in postpartum and it's like, you got it, you're a mom now, follow your mom intuition. And it's like, I am not in a position to be taking care of an infant and myself. Like I am in it. I have no perspective. I do not know night, day, normal, extreme, mild, like someone else has to do that. And you can't wait for me to be like, is this weird? Because we're used to it now. Like someone else has to actually take care of us.
Yeah, that's right. And need to be prepared too. Because my husband was not prepared and I was not prepared to take care of myself.
And it's not because he doesn't love you or doesn't want to help you. It's because we need help.
Yeah, we were not educated properly. Yeah. And and it's so funny because after I talked with my doctor and we had a plan in place for the next baby, and she was like, I'm not going to have you just fill out the form. We're going to talk about this. Because when you go in postpartum, they give you this plastic sheet and they're like, do you have thoughts of harming your baby? And I'd be like, no, because you're not going to take my baby away from me. So I,
right.
tell anybody. And then of course I didn't have it the second time.
Yeah, they say that with the way that all the changes in our brains, it's not as extreme with with subsequent pregnancies. I mean, there are still more changes, but that like real rewiring, that matrescence, that like adolescence that happens again is the most dramatic from woman to mother.
It makes sense. I know we're a little over time, but Alisa, do you want to talk a little bit about body image and we can leave after that? We can close the conversation down.
Yeah, and I will keep it short because this is my jam. And I write about this a lot. I have podcast episodes about it. I like it all over the place. They're just, again, this external that what we've internalized, this conditioning that things go back and that there is a possibility of snapping back. We just really gotta like release that and explore instead that now we have a body who grew and gave birth to a baby, however that went down, and that your body can't go back to being a body that didn't have a baby, because no matter how much weight you lose or skin is removed or bikes you spin or miles you run, your body will still have had a baby. So it's going to be different. And I really, I had this in a lot of ways because like for about a year, I couldn't stand up off the floor without farting involuntarily. So like that'll make you feel weird about your body. And again, I was a professional dancer for a long time. Like I was a size 0 and teeny tiny and everything looked good and everything was like where it's supposed to be, without me having to think about it. And like now I got like this sick mom bod, and I didn't own that from day one. Do you know what I mean? It's a process, but what I found, and again, in myself, in my experience, in this body that I have, and working with women through this transition, is really like, we are newborns also. And so like really, really driving home the fact that like we are not alone in this, because we're doing this with our baby. We both have diastasis. We both, and everyone who's pregnant, you had diastasis.
Everyone
The
does.
diagnosis comes from as you heal, if it doesn't heal all the way back together, which is not all the way back together. It's more than 2 fingers.
Mhm.
So just because I know that we get panicked about it, but like your baby has one too, because neither of you have core strength because of everything that just happened. So like, do tummy time with your kid. Like, you are building it the same way at the same rate. And that this really finding, like literally finding your center again, mentally, emotionally, physically, referring to your core muscles, which include your pelvic floor, which newsflash, whether the baby came out downstairs or the front door, your pelvic floor is trashed after pregnancy. So just a heads up. That like the way to get centered again, to find that core stability, both in your physical body, your core muscles, your stabilizers, but also in your identity, in your emotions, is from the inside out. It has to do with first how you feel inside your body. That like, I marvel still at, I wake up and I'm like, my pants still don't fit. My pants still don't fit. And so then I'll go take yoga, and then I finish and I get put on something else, and I feel freaking awesome. And I'll tell you what, the pants fit the exact same way because I still have the exact same body. I just did some moves and I feel better. I feel
took my
more
pants away and bought new pants, and
well,
when I started feeling
this
better.
this is the next thing.
Right?
And here's the other thing, Alisa, get rid of pants that don't fit.
Yeah.
Stop it. It's not nice, and they don't fit you. Get out of here. Get new pants and that you feel good in, and like cut the tag out if that's something that bothers you.
Yeah.
Also, like, you could buy, there was like a thing that went around on Instagram recently of like, I think it was like 8 different pairs of pants, all
Saw that.
size 12, and
And they were
they're
like-
like all over the place. So no
Saw
wonder
that.
we're all messed up about it. But also like do things that make your body feel good. So
Yeah.
like, I love yoga and Pilates. What I love more than that, more than anything in the whole wide world, is dancing. So have a dance party that makes you feel good in your body. I'm going to mention the cashmere onesie again.
Yeah.
It works well for me. I highly recommend if that is something that's a possibility for you. So things like yin yoga that are restorative, that don't take a lot of energy, but get you focused in your body, that you are getting comfortable in your body. And my number one favorite thing to do, friends, it is so easy. You're going to pass out. The next time you take a shower, because we all do it sometimes, maybe not every day, but it happens, light a candle and turn out all the lights and take a candle lit shower. And it heightens your other senses. It quiets your mind. And it is very, and I don't mean this in a sexy time way, although you could try that too. It's pretty cool. But it's a very sensual experience.
Yeah.
And connecting with yourself in a sensual, loving, caring, the water, it doesn't, like, sensual is different than sexual, and it makes you feel better in your body. And I promise you, then, even if your pants don't fit, you'll feel better when you put them on. But also, if they don't fit, again, Thread Up will send you a box or a tag, and you put it in your own box. You can send them your clothes and they will sell them and give you dollars for them.
Yeah, that's nice.
And that's what you can do, or Poshmark, whatever, the real, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Let somebody else enjoy them and get clothes that make you feel really awesome, and really just move your body and eat foods that make you feel good in your body. And then it's like that Roald Dahl quote, like, and then your smile, like if you think happy thoughts, then you, like, sunshine and rainbows comes out of your ass. I don't know what he said. He didn't say that. That's not Roald Dahl. He wouldn't say that word, but
I love it.
Do things that make the insides feel good, because then you'll look good on the outside.
Yeah, so true.
Agree with
Well, I
that.
just can't tell you all how much I appreciate your time. I know we're 12 minutes over and I don't want to monopolize your afternoon or your morning, wherever you are. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Fun.
This
So
is an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, and ditto. I feel the same way. Okay, I'll be in touch with all of you soon. The recording will be available and we will share that around. I hope everybody has a lovely weekend.
Thank you so
Thank
much.